Ach, endlich fertig mit Reichland.
2 Wochen. Nur für ein bisschen Geografie und Kultur von einer einzigen Provinz. Hätte nie gedacht, dass die Schreiberei so viel Arbeit ist. Vielleicht war es auf Vatershof doch nicht so schlecht.
Willkommen in der kaiserlichen Bürokratie, Neuling. Warten Sie nur, bis wir uns mit der Wirtschaft oder dem Justizsystem befassen. Oder noch schlimmer, der Politik.
Um die bekommen wir uns, wenn's brennt. Hoffentlich. Aber egal, was kommt als nächstes? Wissenland? Mittenland? Vielleicht was Lustigeres wie Avalan?
Nein, im Moment habe ich keine Lust, mich mit Wissenlands Felsen und Rust herumzuschlagen. Nur um Wissenburg und Weigelich zugunsten von Lohn abzutun und als Zusammenfassung zu schreiben. Es ist die Hauptstadt und es existiert. Was Mittelland angeht, ich weiß nicht. Ich finde es leicht amüsant. Die Nummer 2 des Reiches, sagen Sie ihnen das nicht ins Gesicht, später einzuordnen, als Sie es von sich selbst glauben. Lassen Sie uns stattdessen die große Provinz der Liga von Ostermark durchkehren.
Ostermark also. Wollen's wirklich von all der Pracht im Reichland direkt in das Düstere da drüben? Ein komischer Sprung. Aber von mir aus. Ehrlich gesagt, die waren mir nicht so ganz geheuer. Mit ihrer ganzen Grübelei. Mein Vater hat immer gesagt, lädt mich an Ostermark zum Feiern ein. Der macht die aus wie der Hochzeitsretter Leichenpredigt.
Ja, Ihr Vater hat damit nicht unrecht. Wir
Bechafen,
Nordländer werden
Rundfähre,
und
Osterwald,
Sie sollen uns nicht den ganzen Tag weinen und grübeln sein.
Mordheim. Sagen's, Reinhard. Warum machen die Handelsstraßen so einen großen Bogen um die Stadt da? Mordheim. Ist die Maut da so schlimm?
Was? Donnerwetter! Der Wein brennt mir in der Keller! Müller, wie mein Mann ans buschigem Bars können Sie keine Ahnung von Mordheim haben? Ich weiß, Sie sind ein Stehländer aus einer kleinen Bauerngemeinde. Aber haben Sie Ihre Tage damit verbracht, auf einen Felsen zu tagträumen?
Naja, Geschichte und das Ganze so. Das hat mich halt nicht so interessiert. Mir war wichtiger, was auf den Tisch kommt und ob das komische Geräusch aus dem Wald erwischt ist. Nur Einbildung oder so ein Scheusal. Also, ist die Not jetzt schlimm oder nicht?
Die Maul! Beim Hammer, Müller, halten Sie mich für einen Steuereintreiber? Man umgeht Mordheim nicht, um ein paar Pfennige zu sparen. Man umgeht es, damit die eigene Seele nicht vor einer Abscheulichkeit, die sich jedem Verständnis entzieht, aus dem Leib gerissen wird. Sigmar selbst hat diese Stadt mit seinen 2 schweifigen Kometen erschlagen, Müller. Er hat buchstäblich das Symbol des Reiches geworfen, um diese Stadt direkt in Verdammnis zu befördern. Das ist kein Ort, Boheshöhle. Es ist eine rankende Höhle, die sich über die Welt schlängelt und buchstäblich neben ihren Grenzen liegt. Jetzt verstehe ich, warum Sie immer durch die Eignungsprüfung gefallen sind. Ach, was auch immer. Bringen wir es einfach hinter uns. Ich werde Sie über die Details auf dem Laufenden halten.
Ein Glas Wein für Sie?
Schenken Sie mir mindestens 4 Gläser ein. Ich spüre schon die Kopfschmerzen kommen.
Ostermark, translated literally to English, Eastern March or Eastern Border, home of the Ostrogoths, which in modern times becomes the League of Ostermark. Current elector count, Wolfram Hedwig, Chancellor of the League of Ostermark, Prince of Bechafen. Though Ostermark stood since Sigmar's time the League of Ostermark rose from fire and ruin. In the waning years of the 19th century, during the slight kerfuffle known as the Age of Free Emperors, a comet smote the capital of Mordheim. The city was shattered, the ruling line extinguished. From the ashes, the surviving towns and villages did not kneel or flee, but banded together, forging a new oligarchy from the wreckage. Thus was born the League of Ostermark, born of necessity, not lineage. The province lies in the far east of the empire, bordering Talabeklan in the west, Kislev in the north, the World's Edge Mountains in the east, and separated from the travesty that is Stirlen in the south by the river Stir. Even worse, that particular branch of Stirlen is Sigmar-forsaken Sylvania, realm of the vampire count. Set on the empire's far eastern fringe, where the gods' light fades into the mist of Kislev and the towering spires of the World's Edge Mountains, Ostermark is a land both hostile and gracious to its inhabitants. Its lands are fertile, but beset by threats that routinely try to trample on said fertility. Keyword being try, as the people of Ostermark are no pushovers, and being saddled between the triple threat of Kislev, the World's Edge, and Sylvania, has bred a hardy and valiant stock. But before we get into the province proper, let's take a, hopefully, quick side tour of history, sprinkled with a decent topping of politics on top. My favorite. Now, Warhammer Fantasy was an evolving setting, and typical of Mr. Workshop, the lore could sometimes get tangled up between editions, retcons, and all that hullabaloo. For example, the states that were considered electoral provinces in the first edition of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay were not all the same ones that we know from later editions. Thus, to connect the older lore to the newer lore, there was concocted an event to explain such a conundrum. The Turmoil of 2512 IC was the device, coming with the 4th edition of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, Empire in Ruins. To get us up to speed concerning this momentous event, I shall use this introduction to the history of the Turmoil, penned by one Herr Quintus Fassbinder, professor and fellow of the University of Altdorf. I'll try and summarize things while adding some little details from the lorebook itself, so we don't waste too much time on this. But still, this event is quite important to understanding a great many things of the socio-political and geopolitical circumstances of the Empire just before the end times. So I'd like to make it clear before we move on to Ostermark and the other provinces. The Turmoil was known for its brevity, lasting only a few summer months, and its intensity, the borders of the Empire being reconfigured on a scale not seen since the Great War against Chaos in its aftermath. Typical of the Empire, the conflict began by provincial squabbling. In the spring of 2512 IC, border skirmishes broke out between Oslan and Talabeklan, due to conspiratorial gossips that the Crown Prince of Oslan, Hergard von Tassenink, who had disappeared into the Grey Mountains, was actually slain on orders of the Elector of Talabeklan, Grand Duke Krieglitz. Diplomats sent to the capital of Oslan, Wolfenburg, soon realized the futility of their mission, for when they reached the capital, the two provinces were already openly at arms. Furthermore, in Middenland, Mordheim, Talabeklan, and Talabheim, fashionable hardline revivalism swept through the northern cults of Ulrich, whose adherents began to vocally question the legitimacy of both Sigmar and his emperor. The elevation of a sharp-tongued, Sigmar-hating preacher to the seat of the Ar Ulrich did little to soothe matters. In the northeastern corner of the empire, 3 provinces were brandishing their arms. Theoderic Gauser of Nordland, Aldebrand Ludenhof of Hochland, and Wolfram Hedwig of Ostermark, to varying degrees organized or inspired rebellions and dissatisfaction against the rule of Middenheim. In sunny, but currently not jolly Averland, the current ruling family, the Albtraums, and the former ruling family, the Lightdorfs, are engaged in fisticuffs over who should rule the province, causing the province to devolve into anarchy. Now, our glorious emperor, Karl Franz, custodian of the Empire of Sigmar, would usually squash these squabbles with his usual political savvy. But, unfortunately, he was sick, poisoned by agents of the Chaos cult, the Purple Hands. Worse, his personal physician, Henrik Kappelmüller, was also a member of said cult, and prescribed medicines that kept the Emperor sick and easily manipulated. The Emperor's double, Hermann von Feilbach, was a loyal Reichsguard, but he was no Karl Franz, and was influenced by the head of the Altdorf cell of the Purple Hand, Jan Suntermein, to order the takeover of Ubersreich. That town just can never catch a break. And issue the notorious Mutant Edict. Thus, both the nobles and Sigmarites were alienated, and Karl Franz couldn't condemn the aggression of the counts, lest to be called a hypocrite. A desperate gambit for peace, a political marriage between the houses of Mordheim and Reichland, predictably ended in tragedy. An assassin's blade at the wedding feast led not to reconciliation, but to an unseemly brawl between the elector counts themselves.
In the chaos, the unthinkable occurred. Gal Maraz, the sacred war hammer of Sigmar and the very symbol of Imperial unity, were shattered.
We're doomed! Sigmar has abandoned us!
Nah, that Gal Maraz was actually just a replica of the original. Made by the dwarves and blessed by the priests, yes, but definitely not Sigmar certified. Even if the Empire thought it was the true Gal Maraz for the past 2+ millennia. The original was left in a cave in the Black Mountains by Sigmar to trap the Lord of Change, Shirar Getru, whose machinations started this whole turmoil in the first place. The last straw broken, war broke out all across the Empire. The Todbringers of Mordheim marched against Theodoric Gauser of Nordland. Middenland was torn between supporting the Todbringers or flipping the bird to Mordheim, remembering their wars against the city of the White Wolf. Yes, the province was once at war with its own capital. Ah, the wonders of separate sovereignties. Anyway, down in Otherland, the fisticuffs between the Altroms and the Lightdorfs have escalated to a full-blown pay-per-view. A bit further south, Grand Countess Emanuel von Liebwitz was bored, and she claimed that Grand Baroness Etelka Toppenheimer of Sudenland was plotting against the interests of Nuln. Troops were then mobilized to annex Sudenland. The climax of this debacle was when the Grand Theogenes Yori XV declared that the war hammer of Sigmar was miraculously returned, and the Emperor shall raise it up as a symbol of unity on the 9th of Brautzeit. But, of course, Chaos does not want this to happen. Thus, Purple Hand agents planted in the Reichsguard in the Black Chamber, that is, Altdorf Secret Service, or ASS, sprung into action, trying to manifest Shirar Getru to the mortal plane. Many lives were lost, including the Grand Theogenist and the Crown Prince. KFC finally woke up from his chaos-induced stupor and started pulling the Empire back together. Well, as together as the Empire can be. Some electors died in the fighting, some were demoted because of disloyalty, and some nobles were made into elector counts. When the dust settles, many changes to the structures of the Empire were made. Hochland, Nordland, and Ostermark, which had previously lost their electoral count status and been attached to Talabeim and Mordheim, were reinstated as full electoral provinces, with Theodoric Gauser, Aldebrand Ludenhof, and Wolfram Hedwig being confirmed in their respective territories as elector counts. Sudenland was dissolved and reunited with Wissenland under Emanuel von Liebwitz. Talabekland and Talabeim were unified when Count Helmut Feuerbach married Elise Krieglitz-Unterm, while the von Bildhofens of Middenland were left as Dukes of Karabberg, but Middenland itself was again unified with Mordheim. They'll probably go to war again in the next 50 years. Place your bets, folks. Meanwhile, our boy, KFC, got married, finally wifing up his longtime mistress and distant cousin, Maria Louise von Walfen. Congratulations to the man. I send my regards. He also named Alia, his daughter, as his heir, as the Elector Countess of Reichland, while his son Luitpold remained the heir to the crown as the Prince of Altdorf. And thus concludes this relatively quick summary of the turmoil of 2512 IC. I'm honestly unsure whether anyone has ever made a video discussing this, or whether the community accepts or rejects this event, but still, if I make any mistakes, please feel free to correct me in the comments down below. Now with that out of the way, we can finally return to Ostermark. I bet you forgot what this video was even about, didn't you? I apologize. Regardless, Ostermark. An air of gloom permeates throughout the province. Any more condensed and you'd be able to see it as a dark cloud hanging over everything. In winter, snow blankets the land, melting in spring into a troublesome, somber swamp. Not even the warmth and radiance of summer is left untouched by the gloom, as the rain quickly squashes any hope of getting a nice tan. Even the sunlight here acts less like the radiant giver of life it is, and more like it's popping in to check if the inhabitants are dead yet. Reminds me of England, really. In the north of the province lies an arm of the great forest known as the Griffin's Wood, another quote-unquote tame patch of forest by Empire standards, which in this case means it's only slightly cursed and infested rather than thoroughly so. At the heart of the wood sits Bechafen, the new capital of Ostermark. I say new because, as glossed over before, in 1999 IC, the old capital of Mordheim, having grown a bit too fond of excess, was visited by the twin-tailed comet, which they thought heralded Sigmar's grand return. Instead, it heralded the city's sudden and most impressive fall straight into oblivion. The Warpstone Comet descended upon the city, absolutely obliterating it, condemning its inhabitants to damnation and the survivors to mutation. Mordheim became so feared that the arm of the great forest near Essen in the south of the province is referred to as the Deadwood, a dead forest for a dead city. It is strongly recommended that one avoids this forest, as entering it will risk one becoming a corpse, a mutant, a madman, or all three. One incident was quite notable, happening just last year. A group of 5 mutants crawled out from the woods, wreaking havoc across farms and villages. When they were finally given Sigmar's mercy, the people recognized them as foolhardy adventurers, greedy for wealth and prestige, who ventured into the woods the previous year, never to be seen again, until that night.
Bechafen itself thrives on the lumber trade and rivercraft. Logs float down from Fortenhaf and Rema, hewn into boats by skilled hands, a craft very much appreciated in the Empire, especially as a strong navy is what stands between the Empire and Norscan invasions, pirates, and whatever else decides an aquatic tour to the Empire is a good summer vacation. Villages and homesteads dot the forest margins, while deeper in lie the bones of older settlements, long surrendered to time's ceaseless erosion. Of late, the eastern stretches near Fortenhaf have become swollen with Kislevite refugees. Seems like the Empire's old ally/human shield wall of Kislev is cracking slowly under the pressure of constant chaos invasions. Outlaws and river pirates are on the rise, and Margrave Röntgen is petitioning Bechafen for troops to restore order. Whether help will come before the river runs red remains to be seen. Between these two arms of the great forest, the center of Ostermark is a swath of moors called, the Bleak Moors, along with fens and shallow lakes sparsely populated and silent as a cemetery. Sheep herding is common, though dairy cattle less so. People here keep to themselves, sometimes not being seen for many seasons, preferring the solitude of their homes to the bustle of towns. The southernmost part is spookily dubbed the Eerie Downs, because it is close to Sylvania, the spooky realm of the spooky vampire counts. Close to Sylvania's cursed border, the Downs are said to be the site of a terrible battle against the vampire counts, a battle Ostermark lost. The legend says the counts raised the bodies, but left the souls behind. They linger still, ghostly apparitions that flicker in the dark, luring the living off the path into bog or blade. Should they kill you, they take your body, then your soul joins their rise, condemned to wander for moors forevermore. To break from the doom and gloom of the rest of the province, the Veld, which I think might just mean field if you look at the structure of the word, although it has a more Dutch influence rather than a German one. Still, imaginative as usual, Imperials, is a vast plain of rolling grassland between the Griffin's Wood and the World's Edge Mountains,
Open skies, windswept hills, and strong-legged horses define the land here. The Ostermarkers breed large, powerful steeds, their owners marking them with unique brands. These horses are prized across the empire, and the Heffingen horse market draws traders from far and wide. Yet even here, trouble brews. The aforementioned displaced Kislevites, having fled southward, now push into the veld, seeking land and safety. The locals grow uneasy, and voices in Bechafen whisper of expulsion. Chancellor Hedwig and the provincial council will soon have to make a choice, one that may decide whether the veld remains peaceful pasture or becomes yet another battlefield. Ostermark has always been a land trodden beneath marching feet and hooves, whether those belonging to the invaders of the Empire or Imperial armies marching to the frontier. Having experienced so much suffering at the hands of invading goblins, orcs and trolls back before the Empire was first founded, the Ostermarkers, or more precisely, the Ostrogoths, understood very much the importance of cooperation. Thus, when Sigmar made the call to unite, the Ostrogoths were some of the most enthusiastic to answer. In the aftermath of the Battle of Blackfire Pass, the chief of the Ostrogoths, Adelhard, took up Sigmar's offer to be one of his counts, remarking jokingly that their victory was foreseen in the stars. That offhanded jest would be immortalized in the heraldry of the province, the star and the crown griffin victorious. Adelhard and his warriors returned home through Averland, Sterlen, and Talabekland, and brought back wives, mistresses, and more than a few new family feuds. Thus was born the blood mix that defines Ostermark, Ostrogoths, but finely mixed with a kaleidoscope of diverse blood. The invasions of the mid-18th century added Ungol blood to the already varied brew, bringing in a new tradition of horse racing to Ostermark's veld region. Kislevites escaping from the cruelty of either the Tsar or Kislev's naturally hostile lands weave more threads into the already colorful tapestry that is Ostermark, resulting in a people visibly distinct from their western cousins, yet still imperial in culture and language. Ostermarkers tend to be like the land they till, stocky, broad, and weather-worn with eyes that reveal their Eastern Ungol heritage. Unlike the other provinces, Ostermarker men prefer long, well-groomed mustaches to flowing beards. Rather than floppy hats topped with feathers and other charming accessories, they prefer high-peaked fur hats, influenced both by the harsh cold weather and the fashion sense of Kislev. The women wear their hair depending on their relationship status, long if unwed, braided and bound if not. To fight the cold, Ostermarkers are fond of several layers of clothing that the other provinces deem old-fashioned and quaint. At their best, Ostermarkers are a spirited folk. They sing, they dance, they drink hard, and they ride harder. More ways than one. Their parties last until dawn, and their duels often begin at breakfast. The women are famously passionate, and famous for throwing would-be suitors onto the snow half-naked if they misread that passion. Or, as the Sigmar's heirs books puts it, more than one Reiklander dandy has been dumped semi-naked on the veld after attempting to seduce a maid of Ostermark, often by the maid herself. At their worst, Ostermarkers are morbid to the point of performance art. The line between mourning and celebration blurs. Funerals are as long as they are elaborate, and include enough vodka to possibly contribute to more such funerals in the near future. Do not, and I mean do not, ask an Ostermarker about their day, unless you enjoy standing awkwardly dumbstruck as they regale you with a PhD-length thesis of depression. Many women never remarry. They believe no husband of Ostermark would rest easy in Morris's garden, knowing another man is gallivanting with his wife. Fair enough. I too would rise from my grave had I even an inkling that I am being made a cuckold. It strikes me as a cheaper alternative to necromancy, really. No grave robbing, no priests waving relics in your face. Just seduce an Ostermarker widow and watch in satisfaction at a job well done as a late husband tears himself out of Morris's garden to rejoin the living. The only catch, of course, is that the corpse will be marching towards you, and it is not stopping.
The people of Ostermark honor all the gods, as any sensible Imperial should, but reserve special reverence for Ulrich, Morr, Sigmar, and Tolenraya. The ancient stone circles once belonging to the old faith have long since been claimed by the druids of Tal, who tend them still. The Ostermark dialect is thick, with rounded vowels, slurred consonants, and Kislevite borrowings. TH becomes D, yes becomes da, and so on. It's a dialect often mimicked at noble parties by men who have had too much brandy and not enough shame. But there's a music to it. Archaic words long dead elsewhere still bloom here, like old songs in a lonely, forgotten garden. Now, there aren't a lot of notable places in the province, especially compared to Reichland. There are only 4, including the capital: Essen, Fortenhaf, Heffingen, and Bechafen. Essen is like a smaller Ostermark if you look at it geographically. Just as Ostermark is sandwiched in between the threads of Kislev, the World's Edge, and Sylvania, so is Essen sandwiched between the threads of the Dead Wood, the Eerie Downs, and the Hell Fen. That site of a climactic battle of the legendary Vampire Wars. The third one, not the first one with Vlad. The one with Manlet von Kampstein. Like mother, like daughter, as they say. Ruled by Margrave Gotthold Schurz, life in the reputedly most haunted village in the Empire is certainly not a pleasant one. Though drunkards at the taverns like to exaggerate it, the threat of the restless dead hangs hauntingly like a dense mist that permeates to your very bones. Fortenhaf is a lonely outpost ruled by Margrave Konrad Drunken. It's crucial in defending against invasions from Kislev, and for good old toll collecting. Second to Bechafen, its ferry is important, and in a strategically advantageous place for carrying both goods, troops, and more along the upper Talabek and down its tributaries. Fortenhaf is also the most Kislevite of the province's town, intermarriage between borders being very common. So, if you're some bumpkin interested in shagging up with a strong-legged, grim-faced, passionate Kislevite woman, but you don't want to go to Oslan or Kislev itself, then Fortenhaf is a good alternative. Heffingen lies right at the center of the province, ruled by Margrave Richard Tochnier, which, looking at his name, I think he might be of Bretonian descent. Poor guy. As mentioned earlier, it is famed for breeding some of the best horses in the Empire, with its horse market drawing buyers from as far as Estalia, which is particularly insane considering the massive distance between Heffingen and Estalia. The Estalians really love their horses, I suppose. As mentioned earlier, the capital of the province is Bechafen. It doesn't have the deluge of information like Altdorf, Mordheim, or Talabai. Bechafen is Ostermark's heart and shield. Its buildings rise like crooked teeth, narrow, towering, and leading perilously over alleys so dark the Skavens would mistake them for home. Made of great forest timber, even the structure of the city is suffused with a melancholic mood. That cloud of gloom is really doing a number on this province. The noble house Hedwig hosts a chancellorship, and with it, by Emperor's decree, the elector's mantle. Though only by the assent of the League's council. It's a hereditary position, but it must still be approved by votes of the council. How very democratic of them. Renowned for its boatyards, Bechafen also boasts 2 great dwarf-made sawmills, where logs become planks, and where more than one corpse has become pulp, courtesy of the local gangs. There are only 2 notable locations in the city that we have information of. The Red Teeth Tavern is a Chilean-built den of blood and ale that caters to ogres, mercenaries, dockhands, and those simply passing through. Its owner, Ruggero Stili, a retired pit fighter with more scars than teeth, knew how to earn their coin. Massive booze, huge chunks of meat, and ale in quantities fit to drown a Kislevite bear. The Temple of Morr is large, solemn, and old, fitting for a province so theatrical about death and despair. Its crypts run deep beneath the city, and its priests walk slow and speak slower. As a rather comical note, the vampirate Luthor Harkon, that mind-shattered undead Jack Sparrow, once called Bechafen his home.
So, when Luthor Harkon raised new Bechafen in Lastria, he mocked the Imperial god of death with a twisted parody, a temple of undeath. Petty, theatrical, and very much in character. Yes, you somehow made a cameo in this video, Harkon. I hope you're happy. Thus, our tour through the League of Ostermark ends here. It's a dour, long-suffering land, and the cloud of gloom that permeates it has even etched itself into the very soul of the people. But despite that, life perseveres. Even if the other provinces consider them quaint and miserable, the spirit of the people of Ostermark has not been broken. While the more peaceful provinces like Reichland and Avalan can sleep easy without much worries of invasions, the inheritors of the Ostrogoths have for many centuries weathered the ebbing and flowing tide of threats, both mundane and immortal. And throughout all that time, they did not break. And when the heavens themselves conspired against them, when the twin-tailed comets smashed their capital to ruin, the other provinces turned a blind eye. Left to their own plight, the people of Ostermark spat in the face of despair, enduring as they always have, together. In the face of cosmic wrath and mortal indifference, they fought on. Perhaps more than anyone else in the Empire, Ostermark understands just how cruel the world truly is, and more than anyone else, they are able to appreciate the terrible beauty of life, because they understand that death is a part of life. If this province were to have a motto, it would be Memento Mori, remember death.